Hello, my dear students, and welcome to another video for our class in Systems Integration and Architecture. And in this video, we are going to build a very simple RESTful web API using vanilla PHP. So first up, we'll create a new folder for this. We'll call this folder Basic API. And we'll open up Visual Studio Code on this folder. First thing we need to create here will be using Composer. So create composer.json because we are going to import a dependency for our environment. So we open up composer.json, and here we are going to require vlucas slash php.env, and we'll be using version 2.4. All right. And we'll execute on the terminal composer install. This will try the composer will now try and grab a copy of the php.env repository or dependency, and now we have a vendor folder, and inside of the vendor folder we have our vlucas folder, which has the dependency for our php.env, and we'll be using this to be able to create our environment variables and make access our environment variables. So that's what we are going to do next, which is the creation of our environment variable. So you create a new file .env, and this is where we put all our environment variables that we will use for our application. But before we populate the code here, let's first I think we need to create our database firsthand. So I'm gonna create a new folder, and we call this folder db, or just database. And inside of here we're gonna create a new file called db.php, and let me just grab an old code from somewhere, and maybe here, just copy this one, or maybe this guy, right? All right, let's copy this code here. Maybe you have some code like this lying around. It's just our simple way of creating a PDO object, but here these are static values, so we will just simply change this into our environment variables. So let me go back to our env here, and we'll populate now our environment variables. First, we'll have our db host, which will be in this case localhost. Then we'll have db username, which will be root. Also have db password, which will be blank. What else? Host, the database itself, so db database. We'll call this database app1. Okay, for now let's just use that one. So now, instead of having these static values here, we'll replace this with our environment variables. So we simply call on get env, then we have here for the host, db underscore host. Let me just copy this. This will be for db underscore database. This one is db underscore username. And finally, password. All right. And then the next thing is we'll need to add a Bootstrap file, which will call our .env file here. So you create a new file called bootstrap.php. Of course, this is a PHP file. First thing we need to do here is we are going to require our vendor. We have an auto load here so that these files in the vendor folder will be loaded. So you have require vendor /autoload.php. After that, it will be loading what we have in our vendor, which at this point is will only be using vLucas, which is for our PHP environment. We are going to add now an instantiate our environment variables. So first we're going to use .env /.env. Oops. Just like that. I think we should use backslash here instead of the regular slash. And then we're going to instantiate a new .env object is equal to new .env, and we're going to have the current directory, and then we're going to call on load. Next, we're going to also require, after our .env is declared and initialized, we're going to require as well our Bootstrap, so that this Bootstrap code, actually this is the Bootstrap code. What am I talking about? We'll be adding some more require here, requiring all our other required files of PHP. In this case, we are going to first require our db.php. So here require db.php. So it's really inside of database. That one. And later on, we are going to go back here to add some more required files. Next, we're going to add some more PHP files. First, next here is we're going to add a PHP file for processing the URL. So add a new file, call this processor.php, right? And here we're gonna have a class processor, and we'll simply have a method called process, which will have a URI right there. Again, we'll also add this into our Bootstrap. So we require processor.php. Another file we're going to create is, of course, our index. So we'll have index.php. And this is going to pack everything and start the ball rolling. First, we're going to require the Bootstrap file. And then we're going to declare some headers so that we will be outputting into a JSON file. And since we are also exposing this to other applications besides our own web server, we also have to do some other headers to allow other sources or requests from other sources, uh, bypassing some security features that are built in the web browser. And to do this, we need to add a header, access control, allow origin, gonna be asterisk. This means that uh, any request from anywhere will be allowed. Now, why do I have to do this? You see, by default, a web browser, a web server, for that matter. For example, if we'll run this application on localhost port 8000, by default, it will not accept any request in whatever methods. It will not accept any request that is not coming from localhost 8000. That is by default. And this particular header allows request other than from the source, or other than from the host where this particular application is being served from. Next, we'll also change the content type of our document. So we'll have a content dash type, and we'll have application slash JSON. And our character set will be set it to UTF-8, which is the common one. By the way, this should be capital T. Next is we're going to declare what types of request methods we are going to allow for this API. And so we'll have here header, access, control, allow methods. And here we're going to include all the methods. So options, get, post, put, and delete. Right? Next is another header. This time we're going to tell this particular service that how long will a request be cached inside. Caching is the way of the web server to store results inside a particular temporary storage. And so here we're going to tell how long will it take, or will it be stored. So you say access control max age, and we'll give it 3600. The value that we put here are in seconds, so we're saying here that our cache will last for 1 hour. Next will be access control allow headers, and there's going to be a bunch of them. First we'll have content type, authorization, and X requested with. Right? Those are some bunch of headers that we need to deal with in order to format the output of our response. Next is we're going to grab the request URL or URI and convert that into a an array so that we can work with it and process it the way we want it. So we'll have URI is equal to parse URL, and here we call upon the server request underscore URI and PHP underscore URL path. That's how you can get the URI URL from the GET request, and then we can convert this into an array. So URI is equal to explode URI, and the explosion is going to be separated according to the slash. Okay, so now we're gonna instantiate our object that is going to do the processing of our URL and do the rest of the steps. So we'll have here a processor is equal to, remember that we have our processor code here, which is still blank for now, but now we can instantiate it here, equals to new processor, like that, and then we can call the process function. So processor, we're gonna process the URI. Okay, so that will be what we will have in our index.php. And of course, yeah, we should have here a response when the processor, this process function is going to return a response. And what we'll have to do is just echo the response, as well as set the headers of the response, because the response might have a successful header or a failed header. So here we are going to have a header, and the header is going to be whatever the status code that is generated by our response. So here we put here, what should we call this? Status code header. We have to remember this, because we'll use this as our status code header when we create our processor later on. And then finally, we're simply going to echo the response body. Okay, so I think that will be it for the index.php. Next thing we need to do is, of course, now to code our processor. So in our processor, we pass in a URI, which again was generated from our server request and was converted into an array. So now we have an array here. If we want, we can try and look at how it looks as our URL. So we can do print r and URI to see what our URI is in the form of an array. So let's try and run this code here. So php -s localhost 8000, and now we'll go to our browser and type in localhost 8000, and we have an error. It says we don't have a database called app1. Of course, we don't have a database yet. Let's create that database first. Okay. So we go to our database folder and create a new file. We'll call this app1.sql. So first thing is we are going to drop database if exists app1, then create database app1, then use app1, and then we'll create only one table for now. Create table for users. We'll have ID, uh, integer unsigned primary key and auto increment. Then we'll have full name, which is a varchar 191. This should be not null. We'll have username varchar 60, also not null and should also be unique. Then we'll have an email varchar 255, also not null and also unique. And finally we'll have password. Oops. And this should be varchar 255 also and not null. Okay, you might have seen that the word password is highlighted as a keyword. So to fix this, you simply put it inside of backtick, and might as well just put everything in backtick here for all the field names. All right, there's our database, and let's try to execute that one. So here we say MySQL -u root, and inside of the database folder, test, and inside of the database folder we have a app1.sql. Execute that one. All right, there we go. Let's try and open back here, and now we have a different problem. We require processor failed to open stream. Bootstrap 11. Bootstrap line 11. The process. Oh, what's wrong with this? Oh, I see. The processor file is inside of vendor. That's why. Let's get this out of there. Move. All right, there you go. We have our processor outside now. So let's go back and try again. And there we have our array. Because we have nothing in our URL. If I'm going to add a, say for example, option value here. We are going to have, oh, we still have slash, just slash. Okay, we have some problem again. It says that our line 17 in index is trying to access array offset on null. Okay, line 17, this one. Okay, yeah, we of course have null here because we have nothing on our response just yet. So let's just add some response here for now. We'll have http:/1.1 code 200. Okay. And for our body, we'll pass in the URI itself as a JSON encode. So we're basically just returning the URI as our output in our API. So let's try this again. Another notice, variable response in undefined variable in index. In line 19. This guy. no S. There you go. What's that? That's not right. Because I think this is wrong here. It should have been like that. Okay, let's try again. And there we go. We have option and value, which is our URI. That's what we need. Finally, we're gonna code our processor so that we will really be having a actual data to be returned here. So first thing is let's process our URI. We have to make sure that our endpoint is going to be /user. This will be our sample endpoint. It's gonna be /user/a an ID, like that. So we have to make sure that the URI 1 is user, and then the URI 2 is going to be an ID number. And if it's not an ID number, it means that if it's just /user, then this should return all, and this one returns one user with the ID number, right? So first is we need to make sure that our URI 1 is actually the word user. Otherwise, if it's not, we have to throw an error here. And we can do that by having a header http/1.1 space 400 what should be our message? Just say not found, and then exit. That is if the URI 1 is not user. Otherwise, we will move on. So now we're going to check if there is a URI 2 for the ID number. So we'll have if set URI 2, then we'll have ID number, or just ID, equal to URI 2, and we'll make use of that ID to get our one single user. So we'll have our response is equal to get this get user and pass in our ID. Otherwise, if there's no URI 2, it means it's just user. We are going to get all the users. So our response is going to be equal to this get all users. And then we'll return response. Of course, we're gonna create these methods. So you have function get user with an ID. So here's the time we are going to use our DB, our PDO. Remember, our DB has our PDO object there. And since we are inside of a function, we'll access that global object using the global keyword PDO. So now we can have a statement which is equal to PDO prepare. And we'll select everything from user where the ID is equal to a parameter ID. Now we can execute with the parameter ID given the value of the variable ID. And now our data is equal to whatever is being fetched. And we can return a response now. So we have return, and our response is going to have first what was the name of our status code header? This should be a success status code header. It's gonna be http slash 1.1 space 200. Okay. And the body is gonna be JSON encode the actual data. That is when we get a single user. But if you are going to get all, so you have function get all users. So here again we call on global PDO, and then we'll have our statement. Actually we don't need to use a statement here. Just go directly as a data because there are no parameters needed. So PDO query, select asterisk from user. Is it user or users? Up one, it's users. I'll just order it by full name. And automatic fetch all. So that's the data, and we can return an array wherein we have the status code header is equal to http slash 1.1 space 200. Okay. And our body is going to be JSON encode data. Okay, so those are our two functions that we call here, and we get our response. However, if this particular ID does not exist, we have to cover that as well in here. So we need to change this part here, or we have to check first if data does exist, because if it does exist, then we can return our output. I keep slamming on the wrong key. Oops. Otherwise, if data is false, it means that that particular ID number does not exist. We have to return a different thing. This time we'll have our status code to a failure. Just copy this one. Not found, and our body is gonna be a JSON encode of an array that has an error, and the error says ID number does not exist. All right. Now's a high time to check this out. So we go back to our browser, and here we type whatever, and it says, oh, this page isn't working. Maybe we stopped our... let's run it again. What's wrong? Index. Okay, that's cool. But if we are going to have a different... isn't working. Okay, because of this we exit immediately, so it's fine. However, if we have user /1, we don't have any user, ID number does not exist. Let's add first data to our database. So let's update our database. Our database should be added some sample data in here. So we'll have insert into users. Oh, sorry. ID. Oh, no ID actually. So full name, username, email, and password. Values. Let's have myself with the username of Lentrix and an email of, and we'll have password 123. Another one, Juan de la Cruz, Jon Snow, and the password. Another one, finally, and password. Okay, so let's rerun this database SQL file. So go back to bash, and oops, we have a problem. Column count doesn't match value. Let's check. We have our column count 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's correct. I see. This should be a comma. Right? And there we go. So now, if we try and open up number 1, we have Benjelenteria. For number 2, we get Juan de la Cruz. For just the user, we get all of them as an array. Okay? So that is a very simple, very basic RESTful API for you using PHP. And I hope that you try this yourself and make some changes of your own, and just practice and practice. Okay, thank you so much for watching, and see you again in the next one.